Hey everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Talking Trikes. Tonight we're going to talk about a few things of what's happening at the moment with COVID in Victoria. Tonight, Darcy, who have we got on the show?
We have got a big figure in the community. Some may say he's one of the godfathers of the sport. He's just as big as it gets almost. So tonight on the show, we have basically the boss, the boss of Energy Breakthrough. His name is Nigel Preston. He is one of the most influential characters of the sport and has huge histories. All right, so today we have Nigel Preston joining us. Some could say he's the godfather, one of the godfathers of the sport, one of the bosses. But we have him here today. So welcome to the show, Nigel. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, Darcy and Kyle. Good to be here. Going very well. Thank you. How are you guys?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm doing not too bad. But obviously life this year has been quite different. So tell us a little bit about what's been happening for you lately.
Yeah, sure. So look, it's just been a year of cancelling events and solo training, hasn't it? Really, for everyone. And you know, particularly when we're involved in a sport that's all about bringing people together and building things together and going and racing them together. It's really, really hard. So my day job is involved in tourism marketing and events management. And it's fair to say both of those industries aren't getting back firing very soon. So just trying to plan for the future and plan to be ready for what comes next. So that's all we can do. And keeping running and riding.
Yep. Spot on. So Nigel, let's chat a little bit about how you got into the sport initially. How did you find trikes and riding these three-wheeled bikes?
Yeah, so I first went to the Energy Breakthrough in 1996. So that's a long time ago, fellas. Yeah. My older brother, who was a great triathlete back in his day, he was riding at the time, and he was riding for Bendigo Senior, and I was just spellbound. I just thought these things were just the coolest things ever. And I suppose rewind 24 years or so, Greenspeed was sort of the only manufacturer that were building things, and there weren't many of those. So that all the vehicles then were built by the schools themselves. And so they were just wacky, really weird, wacky stuff. Like one I remember had an office chair built into it. Another one was like made using whiteboards. And you just I was 14 years old, and I just thought, this is the most crazy thing ever. I got to get into it. So, but I went to a school that didn't have the program involved. So it actually took us 2 full years basically to get our first vehicle put together. I got a bunch of mates together and kind of sold them this dream of come and build this 3-wheeled vehicle thing and come and race it for 24 hours. And at that point, the internet didn't really exist. Go with us here, but we had VHS tapes of Maryborough that we would show the rest of my team to be like, this is what we're building and this is what we're going to go and do. And somehow I sold them a good enough line that started the process off. So look, that was 1998 was the first year. Did 4 years at Maryborough and had some success there with Bendigo Senior, and then moved on and post school kept going. So it's kind of kept going from there.
Nice. Yeah. So that evolved into being Bendigo Youth Racing. Is that correct?
Yeah, it did. So we the couple of years before I was at Bendigo Senior, the guys who were there were doing some amazing things, some really experimental designs and different things. So they built a front-wheel drive, rear-wheel steer vehicle. They built a vehicle that had a belt drive down the side of the chassis. They were building some really wacky sort of things, which were very cool and very technically advanced. But unfortunately, they spent more time in the pits than they did going quickly. So a few of the guys that I was working with at that time were like, well, let's just cherry pick like the better ideas here. You know, try to make this thing go as fast as we can. And that started to bring some success for Bendigo Senior. And then, you know, I even at one point held the track record. I remembered that while I was sitting watching some of your other vehicles at Maryborough. Gosh, that was a long time ago. But anyway, and then, so yeah, then I had a year off and post year 12. So I did a couple of things. And I was watching a couple of the other videos, and I thought this was a great idea as well. I sort of did two things after school. One thing was that I wrote a letter to the event organisers at Maryborough, and I said, guys, I've had such an amazing time. This is such a brilliant event. Can I come and volunteer? Can I come and be a part of it? And they just said, oh, young person, sure, come and do something, you know, and they gave me a job and like a role, and that was great. And the other thing was that once some more guys had come through Bendigo Senior, yeah, we put together Bendigo Youth Racing for 2003, which, yeah, was our first year. And again, we'd never built a vehicle in anyone's shed before. We'd always done it at school. And so it sort of got the ball rolling from there, and it was pretty kind of exciting time. So yeah, I kind of kept these two trajectories going of volunteering and trike building and racing.
Yeah. I think from what, you know, Darcy and I were chatting earlier, and he was saying, oh, you know, that was well before my time. And even for me, like I was coming into the racing scene, and you guys were just like this pinnacle. Like I remember watching you guys race, and I thought that is so cool. And it actually, you know, fueled me to be, I want to be better. I want to get faster. And I just remember watching this trike go around this track thinking, how is this possible? We're going so fast. And it was just so good to see. I can't recall that much racing that I was racing against you guys, but I just remember.
Okay, it was a long time ago, Carl. It was a long time ago. Yeah.
No, it was so cool to see, and I think Bendigo Youth Racing was so important for that sport and that development. And you know, it was just a great time. So yeah, we thank you for that.
It was always very interesting going across the border to South Australia, and there was this massive, and there still is, South Australia versus Victoria rivalry brewing between the two. And I think I got the sense they were pretty cheesed off in 2003 when we took the title and brought it home. But we did the best we could. So.
And you recently got back into the sport and had some races. How was that?
Yeah, it was fantastic, I have to say, to race at Wonthaggi earlier last year, 2019. I'm losing track of the years. Yeah, but it was just fantastic. And one thing that, like, I love that track at Wonthaggi. It's such a great mix of technical and cardio sort of abilities on that track. But the one thing is that, you know, that feeling of being in a vehicle, cornering as fast as you can, trying to kind of each lap just get the lines smoother, get the lines faster, pass it over to your teammate, make sure it's in a good condition, you know, those sort of elements of trike racing and competition, and also spurring each other on throughout. I think that's really something that I haven't been able to necessarily find in other sports. I do a lot of running. I've done some road cycling, but I've never quite been able to replicate those elements of sort of build it, race it, try to keep it in good condition. And it really is the collective of the team that results in your success or otherwise. So
yeah. Did you notice obviously there was a big difference in the bikes, but what were your thoughts on, you know, riding a water bike compared to, you know, a Bendigo Youth Racing bike?
Yeah. So, to be honest, I didn't actually find the vehicle. I probably didn't feel the vehicle was significantly faster than sort of what we were building in 2009, that 09 to what what's running now. Like, so in 2009, back in the dark ages, like we just knocked off True Blue, and they had essentially a John Taylor fairing with a very good looking chassis inside it, and so it was I feel like that's quite a similar spec vehicle to what's running now. So I feel like a lot of that technology has plateaued. Like, it's certainly evolved from there, but it probably hasn't jumped in the leaps that it was from those office chair vehicles that I mentioned from the 90s through to now, mainly because you can't, like, once you've got someone lying down in a tadpole shape and the vehicles are going 60, 70 Ks an hour, like, how much further can you get? But big change for me it was the first time that I'd raced center point steering, the steering here. So that was a learning curve. Learning that in a wet practice was interesting. And also first time I'd really raced with independent brakes. So that was something that, there was felt like there was a lot going on for me in that session, but just really loved being back out there, knowing that, I still have some fitness and can contribute was really good. But still loved it, and still just always trying to get those corners faster and faster, basically.
Yeah. Love it. Darcy, I can confirm that Nigel's a very good runner. So,
sorry, you probably all run better than me when you're walking.
All right, Darcy, you want to talk a little bit about Energy Breakthrough?
Yeah. So I think the first question is, how did you find yourself in, obviously, the position where you are so high up? What was the transition like from obviously starting at the bottom to working your way to the top in that program? Yeah,
so as I mentioned before, I literally wrote a letter to the committee after I finished year 12, and I was trying to fill this HPV shaped hole in my life that had developed. And so I started there, and I basically went and volunteered for the first few years, and they had me announcing on the stage. They had me doing some judging in display and presentation, all these sort of simple sort of jobs, I suppose. And then from there, more things kept coming up throughout the year. So I started doing some visits to schools. I started attending all the meetings throughout the year. And what I brought to the table, in a sense, was that I had that HPV experience. So I had the in-vehicle experience from a school point of view, from a rider point of view, and also from going to Murray Bridge. So it really evolved over the time of spending a lot of time chasing people up. And then from a few years after I'd evolved from doing school visits and things like that, I started thinking that I want to start bringing in more people like myself, I suppose, who had been in that journey. So tried to start recruiting more volunteers. Maybe they're at uni, or maybe they've finished school, or maybe they've been through the program in the past, who can come back or do judging or do track marshalling or do some form of keeping the program going. And I think that's actually been a great evolution of the program over time, is that we have managed to get more of those younger and younger people involved. Nothing against old people, I don't want to sound ageist, but that's been a really key thing that we've done. And while I was doing that, I was also studying PR and marketing. And so a lot of that work, that comms work, just kept rolling on. So, I volunteered to take over the website, which was sort of out of date. I think that was around 2005. And then I wanted to start sharing some of the stories. So it started growing from there and just building over time. But it wasn't a quick thing. But it was something that just kept building. And I went and did some volunteering at Pedal Prix. When I wasn't racing, I went and volunteered at the Queensland, Maryborough Queensland event for a couple of years. And just wanted to share that around, and went and did some volunteering at Casey and at Wonthaggi as well. So that just kind of grew, I think, throughout time.
Yeah, well, it's a really awesome progression. And I think what you've done for that event especially is mind-boggling. I a lot of people would say is the best event because it incorporates so many different elements of racing and more than racing, of course. But yeah, it's been awesome. In terms of, you talked about bringing in volunteers of like uni age kids and people that have just left the sport. I think a lot of people do miss racing Energy Breakthrough. I've only done it once, and that was one of my favorite experience ever. But is there any room in the future for like maybe an old scholars league or something?
Yeah, look, that's a question that we get pretty regularly. You're probably not surprised to know. Look, my sort of personal view is that I've kind of come from an era, I suppose, where we only had one race a year. You know, when I was in high school, we only had one race a year, and we put all our eggs in Maryborough, and that was how it was going to be. So my sort of view is that there are a lot of other community events around. And so if people want to be a part of a community event, well, then there's heaps of other opportunities for them away from Maryborough. And I think without being too precious about it, what keeps Energy Breakthrough as really special is that for the year 12s, they've got the spotlight on them. They've got the moment on them, and that's what it's all about as part of that event. I think the big opportunity going forward is that, you know, putting something on the weekend before or the weekend after, you know, the barriers are all in place, the marshal kits are out, everything's happening. That could be an opportunity as part of it to have some community teams run around there and do some of that work. So that's how I see it. Look, you know, people could even do it on the Monday and Tuesday if they really wanted to, but that would be my sort of sense of things, not as part of the program, but separate.
Yeah. I always thought an opening act or even something afterwards would be really cool there's lots of guys that I've raced with that never even got a chance to, you know, do Maryborough. So it's a great track. And I think anyone who's raced there will appreciate just how cool that track is and just the atmosphere and the environment. And if you aren't, you know, racing, even just to be there, it's so cool to watch, and just the vibe is really cool.
Yeah, it's I still get shudders every time I hear "Eye of the Tiger."
South Australia haven't quite caught onto that, have they? No,
they need to grab a tune for themselves. But it's an amazing place, and even over the years, the track's evolved. We worked on some grant funding about 5 years ago for a new section down near the lake where the EEVs are, and that's now super safe and super fast. So it has evolved over time, but I think it's probably evolved for the better. And I think it is. I'd love to race it now versus what it was previously. So yeah.
Yep. Now Darcy had a interesting question from someone who actually raced the event last year, and he was caught up in something. Darcy, have you got a question you want to ask Nigel?
So last week we spoke to Sam Dudley, who was one of the Ballarat high school racers. So he may have broken the speed limit in his HPV. So
yes,
I think there was plenty. So there was plenty of controversy around that. There was heaps of ideas coming left, right, and centre. But what was your reaction of Sam basically pushing the limits of Energy Breakthrough, and what was the meaning behind reinstating that lap?
Yeah, so the long history with some of that, or the not so long history with that, is that in 2001, now I am giving you a long history.
That's when I was born.
yeah, look out. So it's a while ago. The HPVs and the EEVs and the primary school teams were all on the track together, all on the one track together. And for various reasons, you know, we wanted to grow things. We went and added the primary track, which was the Regional Roads Victoria track last year. It had a bunch of different names. So we had a scenario where the primary teams were running separately from the secondary and the EEVs. Then we moved the EEVs off to a different track, off to the RIV track as well, or at that point it was called the Holden track. So all going well, that seems okay. So now we've got ourselves 3 races plus the triathlon. So we've got ourselves 4 races to manage. The EEVs though just weren't growing. They just weren't growing in numbers. So they were always sitting around 18, 20 vehicles, 22 vehicles, and we were manning a 24-hour race for 22 vehicles, and that's not a lot of fun from our point of view. So we got to this point a few years ago where we needed to bring them back. Basically, for our sustainability of the event, we needed to bring the EEVs back to the HPVs. And there are a lot of purists out there around HPVs that feel like EEVs aren't real vehicles, in the same way that road bikes, often a lot of road riders or mountain bike riders don't see e-bikes as legitimate bicycles. You may have your own views on that. Either way, they exist. Okay, so we need to respond to this. So part of the navigating through this was to say that EEVs will be back on the track. They'll have a limited amount of fuel, limited amount of power, but they'll also be speed limited to 60 kilometers an hour. That is a rule that's really built around your EEVs, which now largely is e-bikes. They could probably do 90 kilometers on that track, which is pretty scary for school kids in sometimes things they've built themselves. We didn't anticipate, to be honest, that HPVs would be breaking those speed limits themselves. So it was Ballarat and it was Woodley who both, I think, exceeded that track time last year. I think there might have been another HPV that gave it a nudge as well. And so certainly in practice, we were monitoring that, and we had to drop the hammer on a few. And then certainly in the race itself, we had to exclude a few laps as well, which that's challenging from an organizer point of view. You want people to do the best you possibly can, but we also need to set a limit on that performance as well. And I suppose it's a conversation around, well, what is that limit? Is it 90 kilometers an hour? Is it 70 kilometers an hour? Or is it 60? And I guess we drew the line at 60. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's how the history of that evolved. Yeah.
It sort of does. I think Sam would be pretty proud to hear that they didn't have his performance in mind when you were thinking about that speed limit. But was it a really clear vision that you did have to reinstate that lap when it happened?
It's that we did have to reinstate it. Did you say? Yeah. Look, I think it was a conversation, and I think that's one of the things that we've tried to do at Energy Breakthrough over the years, rightly or wrongly, is have conversations with people, build relationships with people, and try to also put the student at the center of the outcome. It is about racing, but it's not about racing, as you said before, Darcy. So we want to make sure that student's having a good time, making sure they're having a safe time, and make sure that they go away from our event better than what they came, in whatever shape that looks like. And so, yeah, that was part of reinstating that process. There was some long conversations around that. And I actually checked the notes before this conversation, and he did 63 kilometers an hour or something. So it wasn't exactly blazing off into the sunset. But you've still got to acknowledge that that's a lot of fast pushing for a kid who's in high school. That's fast riding and a good try. So we wanted to acknowledge that essentially. So
we were discussing that and how crazy that was. And Darcy was sitting there saying, I hope this guy's in year 12 this year, because that's quick for a year 11, isn't it? So
it was really fast, look, and some of the EEVs that had their laps docked, and I did look at some of those as well, because I anticipated this might have come up. They were in the 67, 68 kilometer an hour range. And that's when people are starting to, that's starting to get too unsafe, Yeah.
If an accident happens at a speed like that, it's going
to be bad.
It's pretty bad.
And look, we've done a lot of work around risk management, and, at this day and age, we have such a litigious society where people are ready to sue you at the drop of a hat. So you do need to err on that side of caution. Unfortunately, I feel terrible. I feel so prudent saying that, but that's how it is. So.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand. Yeah. Okay, Nigel. So we're gonna fire you with some quick questions just to see how your response is tonight. I want to know personally, in your years in the sport with BIR, who was the most impressive rider that you ever witnessed out on that track?
Ooh, on our team or on other teams?
On your team.
Yeah. Cal Ridge is probably one that comes to mind. He was a starter for us in the same year in 2009. And he was amazing. He rode amazingly well and really set the tone for us. That first stint's so important to put the pressure on your rivals. And he rode so well in that first stint. He was putting time into the other team up the hill at Murray Bridge. In fact, the other team manager came across to us and just said, "I think you've got us beaten," in the first half hour. And that just gave us the momentum from there. So that was probably the most impressive stint rider that I've seen from our team.
Yeah. All right. So next question, Nigel. What, other than Energy Breakthrough in Victoria, what is your favourite event?
Murray Bridge.
Yeah, iconic. Can't beat that.
All right, Nigel, out of the history of the sport, looking back at all the trikes, what is your favourite looking trike?
I loved our 2004 vehicle. You'll probably have to look through the archives. I might be able to send you one. It just held the track so well, was so comfortable. We'd really upped the game on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Nigel. So out of all your years in racing, in managing Energy Breakthrough, what was the most heroic stint or heroic effort from a student you've seen?
Oh, from a student. All right. Oh, that's a toughie now. There's been a lot of stints over a lot of years. One that came to mind was a Nankervis. He rode, I think he was 16 and he rode for 2.5 hours. Really didn't have the strongest team, so really had to lift that one. But actually another one was Bendigo Southeast Secondary College, and they were a year 9 and 10 team, and they won overall at Maryborough. And they also included a girl in their lineup, Bronte, and I thought that was actually really cool to include her in that collective. And they were super strong, super good unit as a team. Those two probably come to mind. Yeah.
All right, and talking about your personal history in the sport, does something come to mind about, your best performance in a race or a stint, or does anything come to mind now?
Yeah, so the first time we went to Murray Bridge as BYR was 2003, and we were super green. I'd never even seen the track before. I think 6 of our 8 riders hadn't seen the track before. And we got ourselves into a cutthroat situation at the end where we were down by a lap with 15 minutes to go, and I managed to sneak past a cramping rival and win the race by 10 seconds. So that was probably the most, that was crazy. Like, the commentator, Paul, he was losing his mind. Our family were losing their minds, and we were like green as 19-year-olds, just like couldn't get over that we'd managed to pull this off like on the last lap and won by 10 seconds. It was pretty stupid.
And BYR not far behind.
Time is 12:43.
See at the end of the active straight, 195. Here's 194 crossing.
Pushing hard.
The last lap. 195, now joins.
The last lap must go hell for leather here. It's 8 seconds to split on the left.
The crowd waits expectantly at the finish line as the riders charge around the back of the course.
It is, it's going to go, going to go.
And at flagfall, BYR has made up the deficit to score the closest and most exciting win in the race's 18-year history. BYR and Ballistic both completed 387 laps.
Unbelievable finish. Last lap win. And listen to the crowd. We're going to talk to the men.
All right, Nigel, thanks for joining us for episode 5 of Talking Trikes. It's been amazing talking through the history and, just having you on. So we really thank you. Next week, Darcy, what have we got in store?
More special guests. They're going to be coming left, right, and centre. We might have some more news on track racing and seeing where the future goes for that. But once again, thanks for joining us, Nigel.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys. Keep it up.
Yep. All right. So we'll see everyone next week for Talking Trikes episode 6. Bye for now.